It's the Kenneth L. Johnson Show live on WPPM 106.5 Philadelphia. I'm your host, Kenneth L. Johnson. Listen, really excited about today, man. I get excited all the time. I'm in complete summer mode, Philly. And LinkedIn. We are broadcasting live on LinkedIn. We're broadcasting live here, streaming on 106.5 FM Philadelphia. And again, let me get started. I'm excited because I really feel like it's summer. Great week in Philly. We're coming off of celebrating the 250th anniversary of the country. So that's one thing. But also this week, MLB All-Star Weekend. I'm a huge Phillies fan. A lot of people know that. So I'm kind of locked in, excited to be here for a lot of different reasons. All right. With that being said, I am working under duress right now. Power's out in the building, but we're making it happen nonetheless. We have an amazing guest. You know, it's very seldom that I've come across people that have pretty much a similar background to mine as far as executive search. This lady has been in the game 30 years doing executive search. I'm excited to speak to her. I don't want to delay anymore. I want to bring Angel Stewart to the show. Angel, how are you?
I am good, and so nice to meet you. I've heard of you, and so great to meet you in person. Thanks for inviting me.
Hold on. No, you're not going to do that. We met last year. We met at Capco.
That's right. Well, see,
McDougal, yes.
Yeah. And
yeah. I think it was a year. Might have been 2 years ago.
Maybe 2 years ago. But you are probably the fourth Kenneth Johnson I know. You're all superstars.
Well, you know what? My father was Kenneth Johnson as well, so I get that. I understand how that works. Well, listen, you were doing amazing work. If you don't mind, just share with our audience a little bit about you and your background.
All right. Well, I'm a native Californian, graduated from UCLA, majored in sociology. My father was a banker. He was one of the first Black bank vice presidents at Wells Fargo. And I just add that to say that when I told my father I was moving to New York City to be a vice president at Morgan Stanley, my dad said, "Have they met you?" Because I never had any interest or reason to be in anything in banking. And it just happened that that's where I ended up. And so as you often mentioned here in our comments, and I see 30 years, I do the math, it's about 30 years I've been working in this investment business. Initially, I started with a nonprofit organization, the Twigo Foundation, that supports students from diverse backgrounds getting their MBAs and planning to focus in finance. And that's how I really learned recruiting in the industry. I helped them get through their MBA program and then really help them get careers. And through that, I learned I've always been pretty good with people. I was a resident assistant at UCLA. So learned a lot about working with people there. And so learned how to match people to the right opportunities, sometimes moving them, sometimes against their will, out of banking into research, but they always did well. And so it was through that's how I got to know the firms in New York. I was going there often, helping get my MBA students placed, sometimes giving the organizations a hard time about stuff. And eventually one of them, Morgan Stanley, said, the stuff you say we should do better in terms of recruiting, especially people from diverse backgrounds. I said, yes, I said that. What about it? They said, would you consider coming to New York and working for us to do that? To which I said, no. And that taught me to not say no so quickly. So I led diversity recruiting for the finance investment spaces roles at Morgan Stanley, and then went to Goldman Sachs specifically as the head of investment banking recruiting, not diversity specific, but just head of investment banking recruiting. Later, I was recruited back to Twigo once we were launching a executive search practice, and so did that for a couple of years, and then was inspired by someone from the Twigo family, one of the fellows, to launch executive recruiting, McCain Stewart. And that's what I do now. Focus primarily in finance and investments, but I've done other things. One deal was sold to me as a private equity deal. It was actually finding a head of a supply chain for a major tractor trailer industry. So as recruiters, we learn enough about it. And more importantly, we learn how to find talent and match that talent to the opportunity. So again, right now, I lead what I call an advisory business, advising both firms who are looking to hire talented professionals as well as the professionals. I help them get ready to present themselves and help them figure out maybe what might be their right spot for them in this whole ecosystem of work.
Yeah, as you speak about your background, I think I was aware of you by name, and then I
Mm.
think I reached out to you when you were with Twigo. I was
Mhm.
hosting East Coast Executives, my firm. We were hosting a resume review and career coaching clinic uptown in Harlem on 125th Street, and I reached
Mhm.
out to you. I think you were scheduled to come, but then I think something happened and you were unable to attend. And
Sorry.
I think we stayed in contact from there. And then I
Mhm.
met you at the Capitol event that D. McDougal
Yeah.
hosted, and we were able to connect through. I'm glad to have you on the show. Listen, your history in search and recruitment is pretty impressive, but things are changing right now. So
Yes.
let's kind of look behind the curtain a little. And
Yes.
what are you seeing that's changing most?
Well, I did see some of the information you sent me in advance. A lot of talk about AI, artificial intelligence, and there's a lot of conversation. What is that going to do? How is that going to impact executive recruiting? Well, what AI does, and I'm relatively new to it, and I love it. AI helps us identify people faster. It's That's just a research. It can do research faster than we can, but it'll never replace us because I say recruiting is really about relationships, and AI, whereas it can identify people faster, it's never going to be able to really understand their leadership presence. It's not able to build trust with people and get them to tell you about themselves and what they're looking for. And it's definitely not going to recognize that potential that is beyond the resume. And so I tell people, we're not afraid of that it's going to ever replace us because recruiting, working is still a people business, and getting to know the people is something that we have to do. And also, especially recognizing potential. And sometimes we have to dig for it. I dig for a lot of potential and find it.
I have a question within that framework. So how are you educating your clients and stakeholders on this? Because a lot of people are just assuming, you know what? We're just going to work AI. We're going to work
Mhm.
that system, and we'll identify candidates and take them through pretty much maybe even an automated hiring process until they
Mhm.
start speaking to real people. How are
Yeah.
you educating your clients on that approach?
Yeah, I'm telling them, I haven't seen it in a lot, but I'm telling them to be really careful of it because it's not humans, and it takes us to really appreciate and understand, especially as I talked about before, executive presence. How is a machine going to do that? Can only do so much, and even when you see it used in other ways. And wow, that should have been a great match, and yet it wasn't once they met human to human. And so we do that. And I think also one thing recruiters do that AI can't do is sometimes we think something else is there, maybe potential or a skill. We have to dig for it. We have to ask the right questions and read them, read their eyes and their presence and their status and their stance. And I think increasingly in business, it's so much more about that personality, that fit, and all of those things that a machine just can't determine. A machine can relate what they say, maybe analyze it a little bit, but they're not. I don't think yet they can read and understand facial expressions and how they're going to deal with people unless it's a people making that assessment, a person making that assessment, because we're still human beings.
We are still human beings. At McCain Stewart, are you guys using some AI at the top of the funnel to do maybe some of your screening or even identification of candidates?
Well, I am, and fairly recently. I'm new to it, and but I'm loving it, and it does speed up processes. Again, from a research perspective, I can put in the backgrounds I'm looking for, the type of experience I want people to have, and it can help identify that. Another way I've used it to speed up a process is I will drop in a resume and then drop in the job description, the position description, and it'll help me identify matches that way. And that's kind of about it. I still have to meet some, I will never submit a recommended candidate that I haven't had this with.
Sure.
Not not just based on resume, not just based on AI saying, "Oh, that's a good match." I will never do that. And some people that are great on paper aren't the right fit for a number of reasons. Maybe they're too senior. Maybe they're not executive presence. Which how do you announce that? How do you value that? How do you equate that? How do you determine that? We do. And so I think that's where AI, again, has definitely sped up some processes for me, and I'm loving it. But the heavy work is still like this. I do not submit or recommend anyone I haven't met, and I consider this meeting.
It's the Kenneth L. Johnson Show live on WPPM 106.5 FM Philadelphia. We are here with Angel Stewart from McCain Stewart. Angel, I want to speak to you about something. In 30 years of doing this work, I'm sure you've met many exceptional leaders. You spoke about executive presence. I appreciate that. How has your definition of exceptional leader changed over the years that you've been doing this work?
Well, I think again back to even how the world is changing in AI. You have to be more adaptable now. You have to be more adaptable because what it takes to be a leader, that's changing. Certainly with the technology, we now often look more for vision, for integrity, which is always a part of it. But I think especially the vision and the ability to lead through ambiguity and to lead through constant change. I also believe that increasingly corporations, and sometimes I'm encouraging them, don't just hire for what someone has done, hire for what they have potential to do in the future. And again, back to that adaptable spice, because if you just work on, oh, they've done this for 20 years, that may not work well because now things are changing. And that's from a technology perspective, that's from a world perspective. There's a new, I believe, requirement to have some cultural leadership. You've got to have a significant cultural understanding, or you're going to be left behind. And AI, I just don't believe, maybe yet, but I don't know if it ever will be able to figure out those personal things that you get from talking to people. Someone may look great on paper, but they just aren't. They just don't connect with people in that way, or they don't have that leadership presence. And if I'm not comfortable presenting them to someone, I won't do it. They have a perfect resume on paper, but those people don't always get through in my process.
You're walking me right to where we sit here on the Kenneth L. Johnson Show. We speak about career, culture, community. And then on the other side of that, in the business space at East Coast Executives, we always talk about real jobs, real candidates, real conversations, all the things you're speaking about. So as you look back, or even maybe look forward on your career as an executive search professional, I would imagine that you often get conversations that come your way from people looking to achieve C-suite opportunities or executive level opportunities. And maybe they're not there yet. They're looking for a path forward. What's your advice to people out here that are looking to work with executive search professionals and that's the situation that they sit in?
Yeah, well, and again, my firm McCain Stewart, I think uniquely to some executive search firms, to most, we work with both sides of the table. We work both with the organizations, the firms who are looking for that outstanding talent, but then we also provide career advisory services to those professionals who are looking to get into great roles. And so we help make those matches, and I think very much help prepare people to talk beyond your resume, to show that executive presence, to talk about some of the creative things that you've done. And I can't tell you, Kenneth, how often I find myself pulling it out of people. And maybe the thing I pull out that they say at the last minute, I'm like, wow, that does it for me. That's why you lead with that. And then so I encourage them to sell their story beyond just the resume. And so often I say, what you just said to me 30 minutes into this conversation, that's what you should lead with. That's your bread and butter. So helping people, especially us, people like us, don't always know and appreciate our value and what we've already achieved so much. to share that story, and then helping the organizations on the other side, when I do executive search, understand here's why you should seriously consider this candidate. I'm very big on that. And it's beyond the resume, which they can read, but it's the other things that I've pulled out of them, and that presence part that I advocate for candidates, individuals, professionals that I present to my clients.
You're speaking about both sides of the ledger here, and I can appreciate it because you're talking about advisory services on the
Yes.
client side, right?
Yes.
Businesses,
Hmm.
stakeholders, but then on the candidate side, you're coaching them and you're talking to them
Yes.
about
Yes.
storytelling and things of
Yes.
that nature.
Yes.
If you had to give maybe your top thing that a candidate needs to
Mhm.
bring to the conversation with you as an executive
Mhm.
search professional, what would that be?
The top things to bring with me. I want to know. I want to know about them, how they got to where they are now, and the whys. I want to know what they're proud of, what they believe their strengths are. I want to know why specifically they're interested in this role, why very specifically. I've sent it to them. I'll talk them through it more, but why they think they're interested in this role, why they think they can be successful, what motivates them. I want to hear. Often I'll ask about, what's one thing you did that was a disaster, and tell me what you learned from it and how you would do it differently. We want to understand how they deal with ambiguity, how they deal with stress, and just other the things, relationships that a resume is not going to tell you. You can see where they've been and where they've done, but I want to know about them personally. And I'm pretty good at recognizing that in people. And then I get that first from the organization and the firm. So I have a deep dive with them to understand what their culture is like. And culture is just how they get things done, what they value, the communications types and the work types and the work styles that they value. And then that's when I go to and see if this candidate might be a great candidate from paper for that organization, but not in reality. We all know stuff in paper. We don't know why that didn't work out. Um, we hear that a lot. And sometimes it still doesn't. But I really try to match it. I often encourage people that I do career consulting with, have you ever considered this industry, a specific switch, a specific type of role? And, sometimes they're like, that's not what I came to you for. I wanted you to help me become a whatever. I'm like, you're not a whatever, you're this specific role. And sometimes it's a little bit against their will, but I usually bring them around and give them reasons why. And I've moved people into different roles with a lot of success. Again, initially against their will often, but with a lot of success.
I can appreciate that. And sometimes people need to be guided in that direction.
Yes, yeah.
You've worked, your background is much more interesting. I always thought it was an interesting background just because, I understand how difficult it is and how challenging it can be for someone to stay in this particular field for an
Yeah.
extended amount of time and
Mhm.
be successful. And you have been. Uh, I guess the question I had for you, you've worked internal doing executive
Mhm.
search at some
Mhm.
large financial institutions,
Mhm.
positioned
Yeah.
in the financial capital of the world, right?
Yes.
But you've also been out on your own doing your
Mhm.
thing. Are you
Mhm.
are you do you find yourself enjoying working in a particular industry or across sectors more?
Yeah, across sectors more. Again, I was never interested in finance. I want to be an investment banking recruiter. I just, again, as my dad said, like, they're hiring you to work in finance. I was, maybe 12 the first time he got me a checking account and then showed me how to, at the end of the month, balance the checkbook. I'm like, not doing that, just never going to do that again. And I never did. Just wait and see how it all works out. And now it's all electronic. So just not that interest in finance, but I think I'm interested in people, and I think that's always been what I've done well. I was a resident advisor, an RA in college at UCLA, and I lived in the athletics dorm just by chance with I call them the big money athlete, football and basketball players, and again had no appreciation for sports. My brothers played. So they weren't athletes to me, they were students, and they had some significant other things going on in their lives, big things, and I understood that and related to them there, and that way. And so I think it's my ability to really appreciate people and what's important to them and how they can succeed. And that's different for a lot of folks. And I think when I'm advising someone, and again, fairly often I will recommend a different focus. It's because I want them to be successful, and I tell them that why, and it's got to be their decision ultimately, and I'll help them get there. But I just think, even with all of the AI, this is still so much a people business, because our careers are what we do, and they're our lives, and what they have on our lives. And some people handle stress in different ways, and sometimes we gotta take them out of that. And then I think a big thing that I love and makes that excites me is helping people see what they really have to share. And that lightens them up. Like, you're great at that. Why don't you do that more? And that's something that I think we executive recruiters who've been recruiters, but who've been career coaches, can pull out of people. And that's what excites me. That's why I love the industry.
I can tell you love it, and I can tell you're doing a great job with it. I have to ask these questions on the way out. So if you're looking ahead 5 years, sometimes, Angel, where I sit, every year it changes to me. But if you're looking ahead 5 years, what do you see as the next frontier for executive search professionals?
Yeah, we've talked about, is AI going to replace us? It never is going to replace us, because it's still a people business. I think what we have to, what we're doing now more, is we're getting people to appreciate not just looking at the resume, but looking at their potential, their ability to adapt. Because things are changing so quickly now, and the way we did things before, in whatever role it is changing. So looking for things like that adaptability, that social consciousness, whatever that means to people. We hear a lot of talk about diversity. They've got to understand cultural leadership. That is not going to change. That's not going away. Whatever's going on in the world, it's not going away. And if you miss it, you miss a lot. And then I think also we look for people who are open to learning. And that's something we've all had to do. We thought we had great ways of doing stuff. And then here's AI, and then here's next is something else. So I think it's getting people to understand and to be open, have their skills. And one of those skills is to be adaptable, to have that cultural fluency, to be continuously learning. And I talk a lot about relationships. Relationships have always been important in this industry and a lot of industries. They still are. So keep your relationships up, an important check-in with former colleagues, especially if you're looking for something, let them know, because it still is that network where someone hires someone who someone knew, and someone else made a recommendation to it. That still happens. The old boys network, it's now just the network. And so stay in touch with those people, be good, be solid, be strong, be encouraging, and then share that. If someone calls you with a need, help them.
I think that works on both sides, because as an executive search partner, I would imagine that a lot of your business is relationship-based business, and knowing your clients, right?
Yes.
And just kind of understanding what works as a cultural fit and as just a standard work fit in a particular organization. It's a skill. And I want to know how you get that across when you're looking for maybe new clients. And I'm sure we always are in new client mode. So what's your approach to that?
My approach to finding new clients, I think.
Yeah, business development.
Yeah, business development. Yeah. And that's a skill I always say I didn't have. I was the recruiter, and the McCain part of the business was the business development person, but they haven't really stepped in that much. Honestly, back to relationships. A lot of my business are former relationships, former students, fellows of the Twigo Foundation, who are now senior managers, senior leaders, and many of them are entrepreneurs and are running their own businesses. They're CEOs, they're executives in a business. And so they know what I do. And why I think I'm particularly good at that is because I know them well. I knew them from when they were just starting out. And so I'm careful, and I can find people who I know can work with them and should work with them and should do well. But also, a lot of my clients from a corporate side are not organizations I necessarily know the people, but I know I've been around enough organizations to understand the types of organizations and the types of people that are successful there. And I'm, again, sociology major, so not anything technical or finance, but always been that people person. person. And so it's always important to me, once you check the boxes on the skills, are they going to really fit in there? I say, recruiting is like dating. You may got to go through a couple of them to find the one that's going to stick. And it may not be in writing why that works, but you just know that it's likely to, and doesn't always, but most of the time it's going to be a fit. But you got to do the work and get people. I think my name is Angel. I smile. I get people to talk to me and tell me stuff. I do take advantage of that.
Sure.
I've had people kind of cry sometimes in one of our interview sessions, and that tells me what's important to them, and I'm fine that they're comfortable doing that. But I really think this is still very much a people business, and we've got to have those insights. And I think I said it before, I'm big on motivations. Why? What's driving you? Why are you interested in this specifically? And if you get that out and that matches with what the organization is looking for, and I believe that those motivations can be met here, then you might have a great match if you can check the other skill boxes.
Yeah, I see you're checking a lot of the boxes. There's a question I like to ask most of my guests, and I'm going to answer the question as well, but it's in executive search.
Mhm.
What's the door that you never knew existed, right? That no one told you existed. And I'll explain. For me, right?
Sure, yeah.
When I first started out in this business, I didn't realize that a lot of the jobs were filled before they ever made it to a job board. And I go back so far that this is before they ever made it to the newspaper or anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of internal things going on. What's that for you? What's the thing, the door that you never knew existed, no one told you about
The
in this
door that
business?
a lot of doors no one told me about, because I never planned to really get into this. So a lot of doors. What's the biggest door? I think probably a door that I didn't know existed is the ability, not the ability, but I guess the need to really, in closing a candidate. Sometimes you get so far and they've checked every box, they've met everybody, everybody's like them. We are so sure that they're going to accept the job because they've made us jump through some hoops. If we really like them, we're going to do all these things. You got to relocate their horse. You got to do all these kinds of things, and you say yes to all the things, and then they still say no. And to accepting the job. You're like, what is it? And it doesn't happen often, but it happens. And sometimes I think it's the more hassle, the more jumping through of hoops of relocating horses from another country, which I'm not even sure was legal at the time. But we we agreed to do it and figure it out.
Sure.
I'm not going to tell you where that was with. And then they still said no. We made all of those things. And so because it is still a people business, we just have to understand that and move on. We ask them, why? Did you get a better offer somewhere? Did you, what? And I just didn't feel, and you went through all those other things. And it could be a volume of things. That oldest kid refused to make the move, relocate at the time, or sometimes they don't know. They just, something about in their spirit told them, this wasn't there. Like, really, after 6 weeks and sometimes 6 months of going through all of these processes. But that's why it's still a people business. And I think, we could get stuck in AI and think that AI is going to make these matches, and then they're still going to say no, because it's a people business. And I always respect that. I never, beat them up. You have to feel that it's right for you. And because very often people who we look great, check all the boxes, perfect, don't work out.
Well, speaking of respect, I have a great deal of respect for you and the work you're doing over at McCain Stewart. If you don't mind, please tell our audience before we leave how they can stay connected with Angel Stewart and the work that you're doing.
The work that I'm doing, the best place to find me is certainly on LinkedIn, just my name, Angel Stewart. There's a couple of them, but they'll, find the face here. And I'm in executive recruiting and executive advisory. And then also McCainStewart.com is our website. And again, our clients are both organizations looking to find talent, and then those professionals who are looking to be talent. And I think what I do there well is I help people tell their stories. I have to pull it out of them often, but help them tell their stories and sell themselves. And that's what really makes me happy when the light goes off, like, wow, And one exercise I do just quickly with them is sometimes, especially if they're shy and introverted, I'll read their resume and I'll introduce myself as them. And they'll say, wow, I sound great when you introduce me. I'm reading your stuff. You know?
Well, I'm glad we were able to introduce you to the Kenneth L. Johnson Show audience. You sound great. You are great. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's the Kenneth L. Johnson Show live on WPPM 106.5 FM Philadelphia. It's Angel Stewart. It's the future of executive search. This is the work she does. This is the work I do. And this is the work we believe is necessary to get you to advance in your career. Thank you so very much for joining us. We appreciate you. I'm Kenneth L. Johnson. We'll see you next Monday.
Thanks.